Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Loaiza Medi Binato, and my report is regarding to Egypt and Arabian, Tales of the Nile and the Arabian Nights. Egypt is a part of what is known as the cradle of the civilization or Fertile Crescent, a Middle Eastern region shaped like a crescent, which is considered as the birthplace of history, science, writing, trade, urbanization, agriculture, and organized religion. It connects the Middle East of Northeast Africa. The scholarly works on ancient Egyptian culture are largely based on the recognition of scenes related to arts, theater, literature, dance, music, among other illustrated in tombs, monuments, and temples, as well as on the interpretation and translation of writing found on this. One of the struggle of historians and archaeologists is the extraction of significant information from Egypt excavated art. Artists seems to exhibit the Asian society as the commissioner of the piece which is to be presented and not as the actually was, thus making the propagandized and idealized. Egyptians always have their identity awareness as a descendant of the ancient Egypt. As the larger Arabic speaking nation, Egypt plays a big role in the culture of the Arab world. Arabia or the Arabian Peninsula is situated southwest of Asia. It is where that Islam and the Arab people originated. Four-fifths of the peninsula is Saudi Arabia and the rest of are Yemen, Oman, United Arab Emirates, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Jordan, and Iraq. Within nomadic, a tribal culture began the Arabic literary tradition some 16 centuries ago. The nomadic tradition traveled far with the spread of the religion Islam, especially during the 7th to the 10th century. Originally, it is a spur of the preservation of hospitality and courage as value while expressing a love for both nature and animals. The rise of Islamic faith introduced the original Arabian literature to the influence of the other cultural traditions such as Persian, Byzantine, Amazigh, Andalusians, and Indian. At the end of the 20th century, the strong influence of the West dominated, but the Arabian literature strived in maintaining the indigenous inspiration of its own heritage while entering the approaches of the models of the West. So ito daw, ang Egypt ay isang bahaging tinatawag ng fertile civilization. So sa gitnang silangang hilagan ng Africa, may mga scholar na gawa na sinaunang kultura ang Egypt. Sa pagpapakilala ng isang templo, ng interpretasyon at pagsasalin ng sulatin sa mga makikita sa mga ito. Ipinapakita rin ng mga artista na sinaunang lipunan bilang komisyoner na ang piyesa ng nagnanais na ito ay itinatanghal kung ano talaga ang kanilang ginagawa sa isang lugar, lalo na sa isang Egypt. Bilang sa pinakamalaking bansa, nagsalita ang Arabic at Egypt na may malaking papel sa kulturang mundo ng mga Arabo. So let's proceed to the story of the Nile River in Egypt. The Nile River flows over 6,600 kilometers or 4,100 miles until emptying into the Mediterranean Sea. 4,000 years, the river has provided a source of the irrigation to transform the dry area around into lush of agricultural lands. Today, the river continues to serve as a source of irrigation as well as the important transformation and trade route. The Nile River was critical to the development of ancient Egypt. In addition to Egypt, the Nile runs through along the border of the 10 other African countries, namely Burundi, Tanzania, Rwanda, the Democratic Republic of the Congo, Kenya, Uganda, Sudan, Ethiopia, and South Sudan. In these three main tributaries are the White Nile, Blue Nile, and the Atbara. The soil of the Nile River Delta between El Cairo and the Mediterranean Sea is rich of nutrients. Due to the large silt deposit the Nile leaves behind as it flows into the sea. The banks of the Nile all along its vast length contain rich soil as well, thanks to annual flooding that deposits silt. From space, the contrast between the Nile's lush green river banks and the barren desert through which it flows is obvious. For millennia, much of Egypt's food has been cultivated in the Nile Delta region. Ancient Egyptians developed irrigation methods to increase the amount of the land they could use for crops and support of thriving population. Beans, cottons, wheat, and flax were important and abundant crops that could be easily stored and traded. Also, the Nile River Delta was also an ideal growing location for the papyrus plants. Ancient Egyptians used the papyrus plant in the many ways, such as making cloth, boxes, and rope, but by far its most important use was in making paper. Besides, using the river's natural resources from themselves and trading them with others, early Egyptians also used the river for the bathing, drinking, recreation, and transportation. Today, 95% of Egyptians live within a few kilometers of the Nile. Canals bring water from the Nile to irrigate farms and support cities. The Nile supports agriculture and fishing. The Nile also has served as an important transportation route for thousands of the years. Today, some residents of El Quihira Chiaro have begun using private speed boats, water taxis, or ferries to avoid crowded streets. Dams, such as the Aswan High Dam in Egypt, have been built to help to tame the river and provide a source of hydroelectric power. However, the silt and the sediment that used to flow north, enriching the soil and building the delta, is now building up behind the dam instead. Instead of growing in size through the soil deposits, the delta is now shrinking due to erosion along the Mediterranean Sea. In additional route, annual flooding no longer occurs along part of the Nile. These floods were necessary to flush and clean the water of human and agricultural waste as a result. The water are becoming more polluted. The Nile River also continues to be an important trade route connecting Africa with markets in the Europe and beyond. So the next one is the story of the Arabian story. The Arabian Night is a collection of stories, all of which revolves around one main plot. A new wife, Shahrazad, must tell her husband, King Shahryar, a new story every night lest he kill her in the morning. While some stories stand alone, several of Shahrazad stories contained by a number of shorter tales which are told by characters in Shahrazad's story. In this way, readers hear numerous stories told from the various points of view, despite the fact that Shahrazad is the main storyteller in the next text. Before Shahrazad's first story is shared, however, the Arabian Nights often with two brothers, Shahryar and the Shahzaman, who discover their wives are unfaithful. They set out to find man more unfortunate than they. When they do, they return to Shahryar's place where he murdered his wife. He decides to marry a new woman each night and kill her in the morning as revenge on woman, all of whom he now distrusts. Shahryar kills many until he marries his vizier's daughter. Shahrazad, in the attempt of dissuade Shahrazad from marrying Shahryar, the vizier tells that the tale of the ox and the donkey, and the tale of the merchant and his wife, two stories about the miscalculation and penitent woman. The story do not say Shahrazad, however, he plans it to tell Shahryar as a new story each night and leave him the suspense which could cause with the separate life while the waiting of the next tale. Shahrazad begins with the story of the merchant and the demon, a cycle of tales that revolves around the merchant whom a demon threatens to kill. Three old men appear and bargain with the demons of the one-third of the merchant life if they can tell a story that will entertain the demon. The first two men tell story of revenge and sorcery of the mistresses and the jealous brothers, while reader do not rear the third man's story. The demon spares the merchant's life. The next cycle of Shahrazad tales revolves around a poor fisherman and a demon. The fisherman tells the demon the tale of King Yuhan and the sage Duvan, and the tale of the husband and the parrot. A character in this verse of these tales tells that the tale of the king's sons and the Sigyol, two stories about revenge and trust. Shahrazad then returns to the fisherman and the mystery of the four-color fish. A king in the tale discovers a young man who tells the tale of the enchanted king, about an unfaithful wife killed by the king in disguise. Eventually, the king rewards the fisherman by giving him one of the daughters to marry. The next group of story begins with the tale of the porter and the three ladies, in which a porter accompanies a woman home of two sisters. They are joined by the caliph, his vizier and servant, and the three dervishes. The sisters make the men promise not to question anything they see, and when they do, they must die. The sisters will spare them, however, if each man tells his tale. What follows are the tales told by the dervishes, which include details such as the hidden subterranean rooms, plans of revenge, demons, and captive sons. Embedded in the second dervish tales, the tale of the invenus and the invid, a story told by the captive sons. In this tale, a demon spares a man life but that turns him into an ape. The third dervish talks about a man who accidentally he kills someone. Shahrazad visit her sister, Dinarsads, and exchange their own stories, including the tale of the first lady, the mistresses of the house, and the tale of the second lady, the flogged one. In one story, the caliph from the tale of the porter and the three ladies embarks on other set of tales. The first, the story of the three apples, involves a murdered girl. A slave complicit the crimes tells the story of the two Cybers, about two brothers who marry and have children on the same days. Their children grow up, eventually marry one another, separate for many years, and then reunite. The tale is the entertaining the slave who tells it is freed. Shahrazad next begins a long series of tales centered around the hunchback, who chokes off fish bone. Four people take the blame as his body is passed from place to place: a Christian broker, a steward, a Jewish physician, and a tailor. Each has a story to tell. The tailor's tale leads to another series of stories told by barber who will not stop talking, told to entertain the caliph at a banquet. The barber tells tales about six brothers, each of whom has a physical deformity. In each case, the brothers ends up destitute between named, banished, and or arrested and moved within barber. The cycle of stories concludes when the barber, now old, pulls the fishbone from the hunchback's throat and the man revives. So the Arabian Nights ends with three love stories. In the story of Nur al-Din Ali ibn Bakr and the slave girl Shams al-Nahar, a young man falls in love with the slave of the caliph. The lovers are befriended at the druggist and by the jeweler, but after threats, robberies, and the intermediaries, the lovers both die from love sickness. In the second story, the story of the slave girl Anis al-Halis and Nur al-Din al-Ibn a slave of promise to a king, but the king kind Savior sons, Nur al-Din falls in love with her first. Nur al-Din wastes his money and risks his love to an evil advisor, which causes the couples to flee. In a new land, the caliph's best friend them and appeals to the king to allow the couple to return. Again, the evil vizier makes trouble, but in the abrupt ending, Nur al-Din kills the Cypher instead and everyone's live happily. For the last story, in the third love story, the story of Hulanar of the Sea, a Persian king fall in love with a sea creature named Hulanar, who bore him a son. The son of Bard becomes king and wants to marry Huara, the beautiful daughter of the tyrannical king who will not give his daughter away. Bard, his turn into the bird twice, goes to the city of magician and meets Queen's love. Eventually, he returned to human from the marries Huara and they spend the rest of their happily. The Arabian Nights end with a postscript explaining that Shahrazad plans work. She became queen of the Shahriyar and bore 3 sons. So that's all for my report about the tale of the Nile River and the Arabian Nights. Thank you for listening. God bless everyone.